So moved on, it's scary. I'm not where you left me at all. So if you don't wanna see me dancing with somebody, if you wanna believe that anything could stop me, don't show up, don't come out, don't start caring about me now. Walk away, you know how. Don't start caring about me now. Don't stop now. I'm not where you left me at all. So if you don't wanna see me dancing with somebody, if you wanna believe that anything could stop me, don't show up, don't show up, don't come out, don't come out, don't stop caring about me now, walk away, you know how, don't stop caring about me now. Walk away.
All right, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us for our third webinar, Serving People via SNAP ENT. Looking forward to another great webinar today. Before we get started, I'll just start with our usual, just going over some of the group agreements. As always, it's helpful for you all to be present, to ask questions, to be engaged. It really helps us know kind of where the information that's helpful for us to know about what you're interested in and the questions that you have or points of confusion. So feel free to ask questions throughout the training in the Q&A or in the chat. We'll take questions midway through and then also at the end. And as we all know during Zoom, feel free to get up and stretch throughout the training. This training, similar to all our previous two, will be about anywhere between 60 minutes to 90 minutes, and we'll ensure that we kind of get to all your questions along the way. So I'm really excited about our training today because we have a lot of experts who are here to share some great information with you all. And I thought before I turn it over to them, we'll start out, instead of chat questions, I think we'll start with a poll. So let me start, since I think Sunday was the first day of spring. So I thought, just how is everybody doing? What's your mood like today? In a seasonal seasonal type of correlation. Most people are feeling somewhat sunny. That's good, hopefully. And if you're not, hopefully this webinar turns your day around. Cool. Good to see how everyone's doing. I will end this poll and let me ask you all another question. So majority of you are feeling pretty sunny. A couple of other cloudy days, but hopefully your day gets a little better. The other question I had for you is, and maybe this wasn't a good question to ask immediately following how your mood was, but I'm wondering how, going into your third webinar on SNAP ENT, how are you feeling about SNAP ENT right now? Are you feeling motivated? Are you not sure yet? Kind of interested to see the temperature check on how we're feeling. So take a second and feel free to answer that poll. This will be shocking results for everybody. Let me thank you everybody for taking the poll. So it looks like everyone's feeling pretty motivated and optimistic about Snap ENT, which is our goal, is to not only educate and inform you, but get you excited about becoming a third-party partner and participating in the Snap ENT program. So very good to hear, and hopefully we can continue to motivate you and keep you optimistic. And it's definitely okay if you feel confused or frustrated by Snap ENT. I think I generally ebb and flow between my mood on and feeling about Snap ENT. So I'm sure all of you will go through that same the same spectrum of emotions. And for those of you not sure, yeah, understand that as well as we learn more. So thanks everybody. Just a fun little poll just to kick off our training this morning. Let me stop that and let me go to our next slide, and then I will stop sharing. I'll turn it over to you, Casey. So I just want to welcome our partners from Center for Employment Opportunities. They're, as you know, Casey has spoken at our previous training, and we have some special guests today to really dive in deeper to give you the perspective of a provider on the ground of how Snap ENT is operating and how we can serve our clients and our participants through Snap ENT. So with that being said, Casey, I'll stop sharing my screen and I'll turn it over to you. So thanks everybody for being here. Oh, one other point I will say is the webinar is being recorded and the PowerPoint will be posted on Reddit Workshop as always. And I would say if we could, I send out a survey following every training. Not only do you get to include your song, which was Dua Lipa, not my song selection this week, but it is a great way. I really want to encourage you. It takes less than 3 minutes. It's a great way for us to check in on how you're receiving the information and getting your feedback. So I'll send out the survey following this training. If you could please take 2 or 3 minutes just to answer just a handful of questions. It provides us a great way to check in and get feedback from you all. So with that, Casey, I'll turn it over to you. Let me stop that.
Great. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm gonna just take a second and share my screen. Over here, okay, do this. Great, can everyone see my screen okay? Awesome, okay. Well, thanks, Greg. It's really exciting to see everyone or hear from you in the chat again. I spoke with you last week along with my colleague, or 2 weeks ago, along with my colleague Hillary. And today I'm really excited that you'll hear directly from 2 Snap ENT program experts on CEO staff, Valerie and Maurice. Valerie is our regional director over our Oklahoma and Colorado offices, and she played a big part in launching our ENT program in Colorado in 2019. And then Maurice runs our program altogether in Colorado Springs and runs ENT at that site. So he'll give you a great perspective on how this works day to day for your staff. Also with us today, like usual, is Nick and Susan from SJI, who will help us, our Seattle Jobs Initiative, who will help us answer questions as we go through. So just to orient you all a little bit before I turn it over to Valerie and Maurice, today we're going to talk about how ENT services reach employment social enterprise existing clients and who is eligible for ENT. We'll touch on a high level about how referral works for ENT so you can get a sense of the process involved. We'll talk about engaging with your ENT agency and best practices. And then we'll spend some time talking about just how we communicate Snap ENT to CEO participants and your ESE participants when starting this program. We're about halfway through our ENT webinar series. Today we're talking about serving people. 2 weeks ago we talked about services. And in 2 weeks we'll hope you'll join us for talking about how you fund this or how you think about funding with ENT. So just to orient you a little bit about where we are in the curriculum. Last time, to briefly recap, when we met 2 weeks ago, we talked about specific services that are ENT components that employment social enterprises might be eligible to offer if you started an ENT partnership. We concluded as a group, once we went through the slides, that many of the components of ENT map really well onto ESE existing program models. And starting a 50-50 partnership likely doesn't require you to add new services or vocational training to your model. So now that we have that understanding of how ESEs likely align with SNAP ENT in terms of services, now we're really going to focus on the people, or the clients, and how ENT aligns with ESEs in that regard. And you know, spoiler alert, we are hoping that you will walk away today thinking about how many of your existing clients likely are eligible for ENT, and how this is a workforce program that reaches our clients, our participants with vocational services when many workforce programs don't. So now I'm gonna kick it over to Valerie to get us started.
Great, thanks so much, Casey. I really appreciate everyone being here today, and I hope that all that we're going to talk about is helpful for you. So I wanted to start off this section with reviewing just the basic eligibility for SNAP ENT. As you all know, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program is the nation's largest domestic nutrition assistance program. It's nearly $74 billion in funding, helps more than 40 million low-income Americans access food. The eligibility for SNAP is based on an individual's gross monthly income, net income after certain deductions, and their assets. The vast majority of SNAP funds go directly to individuals for food assistance. But some funds go to administration and program costs, like running the SNAP ENT program. So as we've learned now, SNAP ENT helps SNAP participants gain skills, training, or work experience to increase their ability to obtain regular employment that leads to economic self-sufficiency. So why is SNAP and SNAP ENT important to our ESE participants? At CEO, we really consider SNAP and SNAP ENT to be a critical tool for those returning home from incarceration. It provides food, and food security is obviously a necessary part of successful reentry. SNAP provides access to job training via ENT, and because of its eligibility criteria and the services that are offered, SNAP ENT reaches our participants when many workforce programs don't. And finally, SNAP ENT provides additional support services associated with those kind of employment services. Employment social enterprise clients who are receiving SNAP benefits will be able to access ENT services through your programs. So if a participant is receiving SNAP, they're likely eligible for ENT services. In order to participate in SNAP ENT, an individual must be on SNAP the month that they participate in an ENT component, except for retention. They can't be receiving TANF cash assistance. That's because you can access job training through TANF if you're receiving that benefit. So this is separate. And folks have to be able to work upon program completion. So I think, you know, based on this criteria, right, many of your existing ESE participants likely qualify for SNAP ENT because they meet these qualifications. So to put that into context, I wanted to give you an example of how well aligned SNAP ENT is with SNAP ENT participants. This chart is from a recent national survey of all SNAP ENT participants, not just CEOs. And about 17% of ENT participants reported a criminal record as a direct barrier to a job. So when surveying providers serving ENT clients, they reported that a typical ENT participant needed training in basic skills, soft skills, and access to a credential, as well as work experience. So becoming a 50-50 partner, this is a CEO example. CEOs participants face many of the same challenges to employment as other ENT participants. Our participants are returning home from incarceration and often have little or no prior work experience before coming to CEO. And I would imagine that you're probably recognizing many of the same characteristics in the clients that you serve. Many of our participants are young adults, and about half have a high school diploma or equivalent. So because our participants are well aligned, right, we find that enrollment across our ENT offices ranges from about 40 to 70% of all CEO participants at each site. This is a screenshot from our SNAP ENT dashboard in Colorado Springs last week. 16 of our 19 current participants are active in ENT. So you can see sometimes that percentage even exceeds the 70% kind of average that we see across sites. And I'm sure Maurice will do a really good job in a little while of talking more about how why Colorado Springs is really effective at making sure that our participants are connected to SNAP and SNAP ENT. So after introducing these eligibility criteria, we wanted to ask you all, do you have a way of understanding this information about your current clients? Do you know from the folks that you're serving already whether or not they're enrolled in SNAP? If you can put in the chat whether you know how many of your participants are SNAP or SNAP eligible, are receiving SNAP or are SNAP eligible. Sorry about that. If you can answer that question, or if not, if you don't know how many, do you think you could talk to participants about SNAP access during your orientation or intake process? Seeing a lot of answers here. Some know, some don't know. We do ask if they're receiving SNAP. More than half would be eligible. All of my clients are eligible. We know based on intake information. This is really great. So it looks like, based on what you all are putting in here, that a lot of your existing clients are eligible for SNAP ENT, which is great. Great. So before we move on, we wanted to pause for a moment to talk about the work requirement with SNAP benefits. ESEs should be familiar with these terms, as often SNAP ENT agencies are looking for ENT program opportunities for SNAP recipients to meet their work requirement hours. So able-bodied adults without dependents, sometimes called ABODs, are required by law to work and/or participate in a work requirement at least 80 hours a month or 20 hours a week to receive SNAP more than 3 months in a 3-year period. At CEO, many of our participants are classified as ABODs. And separate from our ENT partnerships, sometimes as the participant's employer, CEO may have to sign off on ABOD hours reporting. But ultimately, it's the SNAP agency's responsibility to monitor compliance with the work requirement. So I'm going to pass it off to Maurice to talk a little bit more about our SNAP ENT participants and the referral process.
Thanks, Valerie. Now that we know who is eligible for ENT and how ESE clients likely qualify already, we'll go over the basics of enrollment from a high-level perspective so you understand how it works in the day-to-day operations. The purpose of this section is not to develop your own process for ENT enrollment, but to simply get familiar with the steps so you can start to think about your own capacity and what might come up when you're enrolling participants and clients into ENT. The biggest thing to remember from the presentation today, and we've kind of hit on this a little bit already, is that your ESE is likely already serving SNAP ENT eligible participants through your normal referral process. It's just really an extra step to confirm that information. To simplify the process in this graph, the first step really shows an individual has to be receiving SNAP benefits, which is helpful for them to ensure food security while in your program. And step 2, the ESE has to communicate and confirm benefit enrollment with SNAP ENT agencies. This is what the enrollment process looks like in practice. However, please don't be overwhelmed by this chart. We'll go over the enrollment process at a high level just to build a baseline of familiarity with the process. First, an individual can arrive at your doorstep not receiving any SNAP benefits and seeking assistance from you in helping to apply for those benefits. In this scenario, the ESE will provide the direct support in assisting the client with the application process according to whatever internal procedures you've developed. After that, and after they've applied and submitted their application, the ESE will then verify the status of the SNAP application and then enroll them into SNAP ENT. Second, they can arrive at your doorstep already receiving SNAP benefits, which will only require the ESE to reverse referral, a term we'll talk a little bit more about later in the presentation, or verify the SNAP status and enrollment into ENT. And finally, the third box at the bottom, the orange one, the ESE can possibly receive a direct referral from a local SNAP agency. Regardless of which of these pathways your clients are referred, you always want to ensure your clients maintain benefit access to complete ENT and move towards self-sufficiency. Usually this will require the ESE to complete the re-verification process monthly, which we'll dive a little bit deeper in at the end of the presentation as well. And from personal experience, I can tell you all that at first, this process does look very overwhelming and a little bit confusing, but over time, and as you become a little bit more familiar with by actually doing it, it does get a lot easier. With that being said, we'll dive a little bit deeper into the third part, which is direct referrals. We're going to start with the last pathway, direct referrals for ENT agencies. An individual enrolled in SNAP benefits through the state or another local agency can assess the recipient's employment skills and needs, and based on those components, refer a SNAP recipient to a third-party partner or ESE. Again, this process is the less common process, as many state SNAP agencies may not have the resources or the funding to administer this process. An example of the direct referral process is seen at our Denver CEO office. Denver has built a really strong relationship with our local partners, and as a result, they will send referrals to CEO Denver, who they feel potentially is a match for CEO services. From there, we will conduct what's called an enrollment interview and verify that the participant is a good match for CEO services. We will then enroll them into our orientation class and follow up with the referring agency that sent that participant to us. While this is a little bit of a unique process in our Denver office, we definitely recommend you build your ENT program first and eventually build up to your direct referral process. To talk a little bit more about reverse referrals, this is the most common pathway into ENT, which is a term you'll likely hear when you begin to pursue an ENT partnership. With this process, an individual is referred to your ESE already receiving SNAP benefits. The ESE then verifies the SNAP benefits with the local SNAP agency, and then you reverse refer or communicate the ENT participant into your SNAP ENT program. In the event an individual is referred to an ESE without receiving SNAP benefits, the ESE would still help with the application process. And once that's completed, they will do the reverse referral at that point. This is the most common pathway into ENT participation. And the key to success with this process is communication with your local SNAP and SNAP ENT agency. A majority of our participants here at CEO are reverse referrals into ENT. This is because a great deal of our referrals come into our program from the Department of Corrections, where many individuals have already signed up for SNAP as part of their reentry case plan. Because of this, we've adopted some best practices for all of our offices. First, we introduce ENT during our classroom training and determine who of our incoming participants need assistance with SNAP applications. Following that, we create an ENT record in our Salesforce system for all of our participants enrolled in our program. Next, we'll submit our list of participants who have informed us that they're receiving SNAP benefits to our local SNAP agency for that reverse referral process or that verification process into ENT enrollment. And then finally, we continuously update our Salesforce records with SNAP statuses to reflect who is participating in ENT program. The next few slides will dive a little bit deeper into these four components of the reverse referral process. One of the biggest lessons we've learned during the reverse referral process is the importance of collecting signed paperwork or ROIs from our participants. This paperwork grants CEO permission to exchange data with county or state agencies, and or can serve as an acknowledgement from the participant to voluntarily participate in ENT. Many sites have adopted this paperwork as part of their standard orientation or intake packets that they require from their participants. Next, with all of our incoming participants, we create a SNAP ENT record in our Salesforce system. This helps us track participants' forms. We enter their benefit statuses in designated areas, and we monitor their ENT status on an ongoing basis. On a monthly basis, this information and other pertinent data is re-verified and updated in our computer system for consistent tracking purposes. Finally, we will use this data tracking system to submit our list of participants for SNAP and ENT verification to our local SNAP ENT agencies. This method to accomplish this can vary from site to site. Some of our participants like to utilize, or some of our partnerships like to utilize spreadsheets to communicate who is receiving SNAP benefits and who may also be eligible for ENT, while other partnerships have established access using an online case management system. But regardless of this approach, through this submission, we are verifying SNAP benefits and enrolling participants into ENT with CEO and updating our Salesforce record to reflect this information. From personal experience, our site has established partnerships where we've used the spreadsheet process, but as we speak, many Colorado third-party partners are gaining access and being trained to use the state's case management system. So we have experience with both of these methods. I would just reiterate, the process can look a little bit different from state to state, but this is why it's critical to build those relationships with your agencies and determine what works best for the partnership. Applying for SNAP benefits and other public assistance can be challenging. It can be a challenging process and confusing to many folks. While processes can vary from jurisdiction, applications do share the same high-level process points. It is important that you try and build in opportunities for your staff to help participants understand and access the SNAP application. In some jurisdictions, there may already be great support systems and resources available to help you with this process. Third-party partners have, in some situations, also need to be subject matters in the event those resources are not available. For instance, in our community, our local SNAP agency is contracted with a few service providers to create benefit stations at most of our large homeless shelters and community centers where people can apply, interview, and get their benefit cards all in one setting. To that point, in many instances, participants have to complete what's called an interview for SNAP benefits. So it can be beneficial for ESE providers to prepare participants for that interview process and provide scheduling support. In many offices, we always look to confirm the participant has a cell phone. We confirm that the number is working, and we remind them to set up their voicemail box in order to receive messages in case they're not able to answer their phone. And finally, before certifying SNAP, administrators will need to verify eligibility with pay stubs and identity documentation. As a side note, SNAP outreach is not part of your SNAP ENT program. At CEO, our goal is to identify and help participants address these barriers to employment, to include food security. By overcoming these challenges, we can further support our participants with their employment needs. I will say in some instances, we've even completed the application process for participants with them present in the event that they have anxiety around completing an online application, or they're simply struggling with where to start. In regards to wages, it is important to understand that a participant's wages will affect their SNAP benefits. Even if a participant loses their SNAP or their SNAP ENT status, they can still continue with an ESE program. SNAP eligibility is typically based on an individual's gross monthly income, their net income, and their assets. So keep in mind, in most cases, eligibility for SNAP benefits are not tied to your ESE program eligibility. If someone does not qualify for SNAP based on income eligibility, that does not disqualify them from your ESE program. And at CEO, we do have several participants enrolled in our program who are not receiving SNAP benefits and not participating in SNAP ENT. Yet in those instances, we still provide our normal services for those individuals. I think at this time, we would like to pause here, and we've shared a lot of information with you, and ask if anyone has any questions.
The first question I see is from Heather about, can you share a little bit more about the SNAP, what the SNAP interview entails?
Yeah, maybe if there's somebody from an agency or FNS that wants to put anything in the chat about that, but that's part of the benefit process. And basically the purpose is the SNAP agency has to talk to an individual to verify their identity. And it's often at a point where they're pointing out documents that they're missing and asking a participant questions that they need to complete their benefit application. It really varies about how agencies do schedule those interviews with our participants. And maybe Maurice could speak to this. Sometimes what we find is like if an agency sends out like an interview time via a piece of mail, or a participant gets an appointment when they turn in their application, they can often miss that appointment. And the more flexible an agency is on just like, if you could call and talk to a case manager and complete that interview, that really works with our participants. And sort of like not having that hard deadline. But yeah, Maurice, anything you want to add there, or Valerie too?
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add in Colorado, our experience has been that the application process can sometimes be really easy, and you can just submit some basic information just to get the person in the system. And then if you are missing information, or you're only able to provide contact information for an application and not really dive into income and assets, they use that interview process to start talking a little bit more about the other eligibility requirements associated with the application. So I think from a on the ground perspective, it's really nice for us to help participants just get their application with the bare bones of information, and then they use that interview process to collect the rest of the information they need for the application.
Another good question that I think we've been getting a lot is like, who do I start with? Like, who's my local SNAP agency, and where do I start? So if you want, I think we put, and I'm not sure, I think after our last training, I was going to put a link up to find your local SNAP agency. I don't know if I put that up on Rediff Workshop yet, but if I didn't, I will. And then also feel free to send me an email, and I'll put my email in the chat, and we can either connect you directly, or we'll direct you to the FNS analyst who can help give you some insight of, hey, here's what's happening in the state or county, and here's the appropriate contact. So feel free to send me an email, and I'll put my email in the chat. And we'll direct you from there. Another great question, and I was thinking of this, Maurice, as you were talking about your Salesforce system of, do you know of any case management software that is already set up to use with Snap ENT, or is that something you guys customized in your Salesforce or CRM to make it fit with Snap ENT? So would love any of your thoughts or feedback on that.
This is Susan from SJI, unless if somebody from CEO wants to chime in, but I think typically it's you're customizing, but it's not usually a very heavy lift if you have a system like Salesforce. It's often adding a few fields and creating some reports that help you, collect that information. And then on the other side, states, use a case management system that it's often custom built. And I think there are a few products out there that are sort of working to cater more to the abilities for states to share their case management systems for the purposes of Snap ENT, but it's also often that they're custom programs. But, I've seen all kinds of like organizational databases be able to be modified pretty easily to collect the relevant Snap ENT information. And I don't know of any that come prepackaged.
Excellent. Anything else, CEO team, to add on that? We're good.
I don't think so. I would just say that we use Salesforce to track our interactions with participants in general. So it's easy for us to just add ENT to that piece. But like Susan said, don't think that, depending on the size of your program, you might be able to keep track of this information in a spreadsheet, or, you know, you might develop your own systems that match. It doesn't need to be like a big scale thing, just as long as you come up with some sort of system to track that you're verifying benefits. That's the most important point.
Kind of in that topic of eligibility. So if someone does not qualify for SNAP benefits, can they still qualify for ENT? So maybe, can you provide a little more explanation about like what happens in terms of eligibility, and if they're not, what happens? Maybe just some clarity around that.
Yeah, so participants, in order to be in SNAP ENT, they do have to qualify for SNAP first before we can enroll them into SNAP ENT. I think probably where we're getting a little bit confused is from CEO's perspective, right? Just because someone doesn't qualify for SNAP or SNAP ENT, that doesn't mean we're not going to serve them. It just means that we're not going to bill for any of their in any of those services to the SNAP agency. So so they won't be in SNAP ENT, but you know, we're still going to serve them, you know, kind of outside of the SNAP ENT funding stream. Does that help?
Thanks, Valerie. So let's see. Couple more questions here from Jessica. So there's a monthly review of SNAP eligible participants. How do we track those that maybe lose their access to SNAP but are still eligible to continue the ESE program? So I don't know if how deep we want to get into the data tracking and things like that, but like maybe just talk about the monthly review of SNAP eligibility, and then Valerie, I think you might have addressed that already of, you know, if they're not eligible, your ESE would continue to serve them through your organization. So any additional thoughts or comments on the review and eligibility?
Yeah, I think the main reason that we review everyone's eligibility every month is because in order for them to continue to be eligible for ENT services, right, they have to have received SNAP at some point during that month. And so we look at that, we verify their eligibility every month because their situation could change from one month to another. And in CEO's case, right, we do have a mechanism in our Salesforce system to indicate that someone's no longer on SNAP ENT, or they've maintained their SNAP ENT from month to month. And so that kind of monthly check ensures that the folks that we're reporting on and that we're billing for are actually enrolled in SNAP ENT and have been verified for that month in particular.
Excellent. Yes, if I can find the link, I don't know why this link always eludes me, but I will find it and I'll put that in the chat for the local jurisdictions. The next question was, kind of around this local SNAP agency of if your ESE is in a different jurisdiction than the SNAP office. So I'm not sure, I don't know if you want to provide any more explanation, but I don't know, I don't know if you guys understand that question of, I guess I don't know if you're the physical location of the office, of the ESE and the participants. How does that, maybe that's around the heart of the question.
Yeah, so I think it depends on how your agreement is structured and like what jurisdiction. So, you know, if you have a relationship, if your contract is set up directly with a county, what's really going to, I think, play a role is where the client is located. Not so much your office, but where the client is located. Are they located in that county or not? In CEO's case, at least here in Colorado and in Oklahoma, right, we have a contract with the state. And so, you know, for our let's take a Denver example. If we have a participant who isn't in the Denver County, but is in neighboring Adams County, we can still help them enroll into SNAP and SNAP ENT, and bill for them and everything, because our contract is with the state. But if we specifically had a contract with Denver County, that might get a little bit more complicated. So I think it depends on how your contract is structured, and where your participants are, or your clients are, more so than where your physical office is located. I don't know if that helps.
Great. I think that, yeah, and feel free to add any additional clarity to that. Okay. Yep. Okay, cool. Great. Well, those are all fantastic questions. We really appreciate that. So I don't see any more questions in the chat, so I'll turn it back over to you all.
All right, great. So in this section, we're going to talk about the importance of engaging with your SNAP and ENT agency partners, and some of the lessons we've learned in Colorado. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to develop a relationship with your agency partners, and really like do all you can to learn together and lean on one another. It's been really valuable for us. So the relationship with your local SNAP ENT agency is really important in supporting your participants and verifying ENT rosters. In order to do this, it's important to understand and follow any state and county ENT handbooks that are out there and available for you, and to ask questions when anything is unclear. It's really our recommendation that you establish a responsive point of contact to talk through your questions and review opportunities to streamline reporting procedures and data management. And to work with your ENT agencies on building efficient processes, especially early on in your contract. ENT partnerships requires, a lot of effective relationship development and management. It makes your life a lot easier. It makes the agency's life a lot easier when you have a strong relationship and can really, flesh out how the partnership should work. So when building those initial partnerships, it's really helpful to get permission from participants to share information about their case. So Maurice touched on the benefits of this a little bit earlier. In Colorado, we have regular calls with both ENT and SNAP benefit managers to check in and make sure things are going okay, and identify any areas where we could smooth things out a little bit better. We've also hosted both SNAP agencies and local food banks to visit our CEO offices and integrate their enrollment process into our classroom training. Maurice, I'll pass it off to you to talk a little bit more about our ESE participants.
Yeah, in our final section, we'll talk about engaging with ESE participants in ENT. When engaging ESE participants in SNAP ENT, I want to tie this back to the graph that illustrates the pathways into ENT. In this graph, I want to highlight the verification and re-verification process that we've touched on a little bit. When an individual's SNAP status is initially verified and participating in ENT on an ongoing basis, either the participant or the ESE needs to re-verify participant enrollment in SNAP and SNAP ENT. There are many reasons why a participant may be denied or lose benefits after you have initially confirmed their eligibility. The next slide kind of shows some of those challenges related to ENT participation for clients. Are going to really link to SNAP access rather than the fact that you're running into issues with running the program, the ENT program itself. But in good news, this is something that you can really help your participants through and really overcome a lot of those challenges. A few reasons participants can potentially be denied for SNAP benefits include their income is too high, they are tied to another person's SNAP benefits, such as being a dependent. They live in a facility where meals are provided. So this is mostly referring to like halfway houses and community corrections facilities. It is possible that they did not fully complete the application or provide necessary documentation such as pay stubs. there may be discrepancies on their application or even with their address. They could lose SNAP because of ABOD work requirements. And finally, and this is probably going to be the most common one, they can lose SNAP benefits because they did not complete the recertification process. So kind of a tip here, when you're developing your partnerships with your local SNAP agencies and your SNAP ENT agencies, build in the ability to get access to that recertification information or the recertification date, because that can really alleviate a lot of headaches in the future. Once a participant has SNAP benefits, the potential reasons for SNAP ENT rejections include they could be receiving TANF or they're unable to work. Oftentimes when discussing SNAP and SNAP ENT with individuals, they can be hesitant about the programs and can show concern around whether or not they want to participate. It is important to effectively train staff on how to message SNAP and SNAP ENT to participants at all points. This slide shows some of the more common concerns we hear from our participants at CEO. I really think to boil it down, how we like to communicate with our participants around SNAP ENT is that we simply are transparent with them, and we're as transparent as possible. We try to stick to providing the facts around the application process and the benefits. And then we really let them make their own decision because they're going to really know what's best for them. As an organization, we've been very thoughtful in our operational process when both discussing SNAP ENT with participants and with our CEO teams. When discussing SNAP ENT with participants, we are interacting with them about SNAP right at the very beginning of the program. We have built-in SNAP information into our pathway to employment orientation slide deck, as well as using that as an opportunity, again, to collect that important information from our participants. Additionally, during our one-on-one job coach and job development meetings, we are integrating food security topics into the discussion and taking a holistic approach when trying to address their barriers to employment. When discussing SNAP ENT as a CEO team, managers and staff at all levels have a role in discussing the entire process. Our regional directors are monitoring and touching base with site directors throughout the month to discuss not only processes on the ground, but to also talk statewide ENT plans and policy changes. Site directors are closely monitoring site level data and following up with their teams on challenges around enrollments and the overall performance of the site. Directors are also responsible in many of our sites for reporting data and tracking invoices to our local and state partners. And finally, our participant-facing staff are assisting participants with the SNAP applications and helping them navigate the challenges around the ENT process. To wrap up our presentation today, I want to leave you all with a real success story we have in Colorado Springs. This participant's name is Russell, and Russell is one of our success stories we've submitted to our DHS partners. During an interview with Russell, he really contributed his success after incarceration to the combined support he received from both CEO with immediate employment and his ability to secure SNAP benefits. In Russell's words, it was a relief for him to know that he had food security after being released from incarceration and having a job from the CEO program supporting him. This combined support eased Russell's burden to find a full-time job that paid a living wage and really gave him the ability to take an entry-level paying job because he knew, based on his work ethic, wherever he could get his foot in the door, he would really excel from there on out. I would like to thank everyone for their time, and I really hope this information was helpful for you all.
Yeah, maybe we can pause for questions again here too, but just wanted to note that our next presentation will be in a couple of weeks, and we're really going to dive into how that funding works for ENT and how, we talked about in the first couple of presentations, how it's a reimbursement model where you get reimbursed depending on what services you offer, and the people you serve. So we're going to talk about that funding a little bit more specifically next time.
So if you have any additional questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I also had a quick question I wonder if you could elaborate on is maybe some of the strategies that you've employed as you're working with your local SNAP agency. If you talked about the process flow and the referral processes, I wonder, how much of that did you all lead based on your intake processes, and how much did you rely on your local SNAP agency to kind of inform that? So I'm just wondering that dynamic of, how do you really create this process flow with your partner?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think it really, it's varied from site to site, depending on, I think one piece is the level of experience that the agency has with these kind of third-party partnerships. And so, for example, in Colorado, we were kind of involved on the front end when Colorado was trying to stand up these third-party partnerships. And so, we provided some examples from experience that we had in other states on how the process could work, and the state and our county partners as well. We went back and forth on like what would work best in our Colorado context. In other areas, we are the agency says this is how we need you to do it, and we figure out a way to make that work. It really just depends, I think, on who the agency is and what they're looking for. I think the most important thing for us has been to be flexible to what is going to work best for the agency, because ultimately, the benefit of helping our participants get enrolled in SNAP and SNAP ENT is the highest priority. And so we figure out on the admin side how to make whatever it is that's needed work.
Thank you. So if anybody else has questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I will also say, I think this is an example as we finish the webinar series. What'll be happening next following the webinar series is we'll have the application for technical assistance cohort to work with you all to help you create your third-party programs. And so this might be one of the processes that we can help inform, along with working with your local SNAP agency in terms of helping to stand up these programs and getting them launched. So just another plug for after the webinar series, we'll be launching into the technical assistance cohorts, which will really help you focus on the areas that you need assistance and how we can help you to get your programs launched. So just wanted to plug that. I guess before we wrap up, Casey or Nick or Susan from SGI, any parting thoughts or last comments before we close out the training?
So this is Nick from SGI. I'll just make a comment. So just in listening to this, which is really great information, spent a lot of time focusing on SNAP eligibility and making sure people are eligible and checking and recertifying. At the same time, we got to keep in mind that it's likely in many cases that as people go through your program, they'll get a job, make enough money so they'll no longer qualify for SNAP. And so that's kind of a good thing, obviously, sort of stating the obvious, but I mean, remember, that's kind of the point. Thinking about that too is the one component that is eligible for reimbursement that can happen once somebody's no longer on SNAP is job retention. And so that is a valuable component, a valuable option in several different ways. I mean, it gives people the support they need as they transition into employment. It can be very helpful to the employer, and it will allow you to continue to receive reimbursement for people who are no longer on SNAP, who have gone through your program and have successfully transitioned off of SNAP because of employment. So just a couple of things like that to remember.
Thanks, Nick. Casey, anything else before we wrap up?
I don't think so. I mean, I think just big picture, keep in mind that the purpose of SNAP ENT is to offer these, vocational training services to individuals who are on SNAP, and, just starting to put together the presentations. Basically, you should be thinking about how a lot of your services qualify for SNAP ENT partnerships, and then a lot of people you serve are on SNAP. So chances are you align well with this program so far. And then the next thing that we'll talk about is, you know, is how the funding works and how you can start to build systems to like track how all these pieces interact on the April 21st presentation. So if you have any questions about sort of how this is tying together or anything we can provide you in the future presentations based on what you've heard so far, please feel free to reach out to Greg so we can build that in to the next few presentations.
Let me just add too about the next webinar on the 7th round funding. So that might be a webinar that you might want to invite somebody else from your organization who maybe focuses more on the money and the funding. We're not going to get into too many details about how it all works, give you a lot of good information, but it is a topic that, you know, might be of interest to some of the other people in your organization that are more focused on, you know, accounting and budgets and funding, things like that. So just something to think about.
But we are not accountants.
We are not, no.
So we'll still, yeah, approach that from the operational side.
Yeah.
So we won't be able to answer very complicated fiscal questions.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. Feel free to email me if you have questions, if there's other resources that you need that would be helpful. I'll be sending out a survey to you all, so feel free to, if you could take 2 or 3 minutes just to complete that survey. It's always very helpful for us to get feedback and know how else we can support you. And then we'll see you in 2 weeks for the next webinar. So thanks, everybody. Have a great week, and talk to you soon. So thanks, everybody. Have a great day.